Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel True Crime and Trials, where I watch trials past and present and report back for those of you that are interested, for those of you that want to go back over it but don't want to watch the full thing. So I am on with the Casey Anthony trial at the moment, and we have the next defence witness, which is Dr. Sally Karioth. This testimony is just bizarre. Yeah, that's the only word I can describe it as. She is an expert in grief, loss and trauma, and before she even gets taken in as an expert in this field, it's about an hour of back and forth from the defence and the prosecution for reasons that you'll find out, but it takes so long to even get going on this witness. And when they're giving scenarios, they're not even actually giving her the full case. They're doing it in a hypothetical way. So they're not actually giving names, but saying it's a hypothetical, but it's what's actually happened to get her opinion on it. So she's given a hypothetical scenario, which I've just said is Casey's case but without the names, and is asked what the demeanour or the reactions of that mother would be due to the loss of a child. So Sally says that everyone does it differently, but she has seen mothers who have lost children and they have ended up face down in the bed, stayed there unable to move. They don't wash their clothes, don't change their sheets, and the way they deal with that loss is to keep everyone close. Excuse me. She says others can box everything up that belonged to the child, give it away because it was just too painful to have their stuff around. And she says that college-age kids that deal with loss and grief have a reluctancy towards grief. So when Sally is told about the whole situation in a hypothetical way, of course, she explains that there are two ways to grieve in the family dynamic. She says there are those that have a healthy family environment where there's proper support and they grieve in a healthy way and get through it. And then there are those that do it silently, where there is a rule that they don't air that kind of thing openly. They are told not to say anything, etc. So they would grieve from what would look like to other people as odd. So then they are trying to explain why Casey went out partying during the time she said Kaylee was missing, and Dr. Sally says again that the point of young people being reluctant grievers and not wanting to accept what has happened, so they would demonstrate risky behaviour like drinking too much, taking drugs too much, and the main one would be overspending on items they don't need, especially with money they don't have. She says this is bereavement overload. And while Sally is explaining all this, the camera pans round to Casey and she's crying. Sally says grief responses can last for years and years, such as drinking, self-medicating, and she says their world gets smaller. She has seen people carry on with life the day after losing a loved one, so she's basically explaining the behaviours of Casey, probably George and Cindy as well, especially when they were shutting Lee out, and obviously explaining why Casey behaved the way she did. That, basically it can seem odd to us folk that she's going out partying, having sex, going to parties, all that stuff. To us it's like, how could you do that when your child's been missing? But according to Dr. Sally, that's a normal grief response from someone of her age. Make of that what you will. So the cross-examination, Sally is being asked if being very, very happy is consistent with grief, and she replies with that can be the same with being sad. Basically, every range of emotion is consistent with grief. It could be anything. I don't know. I don't like to judge or comment on grief because thankfully I've never really had to experience a lot of grief. So, you know, could it be a normal behaviour? She says sex also is, you know, a byproduct of grief, as it's a method to make you feel better, whether it be, you know, lack of interest in sex or to being promiscuous. So Mr. Ashton is wanting to know what is inconsistent with grief, and he's basically getting the answer that everything and anything is consistent with grief. So now we move on to when Sally was contacted, and she was first contacted about this case via email in June 2011, and she says she didn't even know about the trial. She didn't know anything about it. The email asked her if she had done expert witnessing about grief. She says she had been given no facts about this case, but she did look it up but didn't research it. So when she came to testify on the day she did, all she knew was that she had been asked to talk about general research about grief and loss and how it might affect individuals. And all she knew was that this case seemed to be about a young girl that had lost her daughter. So Mr. Ashton is basically questions Dr. Sally about all the lies Casey told and asked her if that is consistent with denial, to which Sally says it's what she refers to as magical thinking, that Casey isn't accepting what actually happened. Magical thinking is as in they know what has happened but emotionally they don't. So, you know, every single lie that Casey made up is because of grief and the way she's dealing with it, and it's in her way of not accepting what's happened, that it's not real. I get it, it makes sense, but these lies were consistent before Kaylee went missing. You know, she was telling lies previously, so, you know, to say that grief is why she was telling lies, I don't think so, because she was doing it way before then. Sally says denial is also a coping mechanism for other things such as guilt, and repression is also another way to deal with guilt and shame. So, you know, it works both ways. You know, denial also comes with guilt. So you can argue as much as you want, it's grief, but the way she behaved is also consistent with guilt. So as much as I found this witness odd, she's actually confirmed that Casey, although the defence are trying to prove that Casey's actions were out of grief, they could actually be out of guilt as well. Guilt that she had allowed her daughter to be kidnapped in Casey's eyes, or guilt as in she killed her. So there we go. Interesting but odd. So I'll be back with more in another video. So until then, bye for now.